Welcome everyone to another edition of Dropkick DiSkussions presented by Sportskeeda with your host. I'm Korey Gunz, and with me again is Wrestling Insider Tom Colohue. And Tom, what a week can make, huh?
Yeah, we've had a very, very busy week. We've had the draft, we've had the brand split coming back. Not as many people have moved as a lot of people were expecting, so big changes to talk about this week, isn't there?
Absolutely, and let's start there with the draft itself. Kind of set the table for everybody at kind of the point that we are now. Obviously, the draft started last Friday, supposedly concluded this past Monday on Raw. You had the 70 or so superstars that were eligible to be drafted. Only about a third of them actually switched brands from the brands that they were already previously aligned with. We did have, just last night, the trade announced that Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross would now be moving over to SmackDown after originally being drafted by Raw. We also had a free agent class that was announced for both Raw and SmackDown. I think 6 superstars each going to each brand. Where the free agents were actually drafted, which I think defeats the purpose of being what a free agent is if you're actually drafted to a brand, but I guess that's just semantics. But we did have some new names announced today. Before we kind of talk some of the specific details, give me just some of your overall impressions of the draft itself and maybe some of the changes and trades that we're already seeing. We're not even a week into this. But just based on what you saw Friday and Monday and then into the middle of this week, give me first just your overall impressions of the draft process itself and how everything kind of shook out.
Well, I've always heard and I've always been told Vince McMahon doesn't like to make his mind up until very late in the day. But it's got worse every year. And this year the draft was pretty much eternal. It just kept going. And when you look at some of the choices that they made, I get what they were aiming for, but it did not work out that way. The Fox and USA war rooms, I get what they were going for. They were going for that bit of hype. They were going for a bit of network ownership. But they chose the wrong moments to do it. When they brought the panels out and they were saying, "Oh, who would you draft?" "Oh, I'd draft Bruno Sammartino." You can't do that though. That's not. Do you watch wrestling now? Don't think you do. So the presentation was a little bit strange. Some of the draft picks, I wasn't expecting a sea change when it came to draft picks because the previous draft was with a view to the Fox deal in mind. But when you get a list of the 2 pools of superstars that would be chosen from, and it is in order exactly who would be chosen. I should have known the second that Becky Lynch was at top, because I was confident she was going to be the first draft pick, that something was going awry there. And it was during the middle of SmackDown that they changed it to alphabetical. There were a lot of unhappy people in that dressing room, and I'm not just talking about wrestlers. Wrestlers got the news too late. But that's par for the course in a draft. They didn't want any information to leak. I get why they did that. But even 2 or 3 hours before the show, you had a whole host of talent just waiting for a script. Waiting there. Everyone was there waiting to be told where they were going to go. And for quite a lot of them, they were told by Stephanie McMahon because they were watching it on TV. And then it kept going and it kept going and it kept being rephrased. You just said the trade that happened on Tuesday, WWE Backstage. Was it a trade? Was it really though? 2 people went from one to another and no one went back. What's going on there? You look at Bray Wyatt, who is challenging for the Universal Championship. Have we missed the draft? Has the draft not happened yet? I'm very confused. It doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. And given how the last shake-up, we had Andrade swapping over late on, we had Samoa Joe changing sides quite late on, I'm not sure it actually is over. I'm really not.
So do you really think that we heard all about before the draft that the wild card rule was going away, and there was going to be real brand splits, and you got these two networks. That's how it was framed in my eyes, was that now we're getting away from the two brands because they were both on USA, and so now it's actually two networks, USA and Fox, battling it out with their rosters of wrestlers, and so that's really how it was going to be framed. And then, so do you think that now, before this even gets started, that they're really just, are they hitting the panic button? Did they really not put enough foresight into what they were doing? I mean, surely they're not just going to abandon ship, and all these things that we've heard for the last couple months are now just going to go to the wayside, and there's really not going to be a brand split, right?
The brand split, the intention is very clearly to draw a line and say, this is that side, that is that side. There will be no crossover. That was the intention. There is no doubt in my mind, and I've been told repeatedly, that this was a plan. It would be set in stone. The planning happened long term. I had my article about the wildcard rule being wrapped up. So I know even back then the planning had already started. That was in July. They have thought ahead. But there is definitely some panic button pressing going on. When you look at Bliss and Cross moving over to SmackDown, when they could have moved in the draft, when you look at the free agents who, even Friday morning before SmackDown, it was clearly posted, free agents who are undrafted will be able to choose which brand they go to. And then we found out on the Monday and the Tuesday, WWE has drafted them here and here. You look at Cesaro, perfect example of someone who took a while to be drafted. So why did that happen? Was the plan for him to go to NXT? Because he's on the short list. He's one of those who've mentioned that they would like to go back and work a bit more in NXT. So there has been a lot of change, a lot of swapping over, and of course the big news in that one also, Eric Bischoff gone. How much of that is panic button? You have to say quite a lot, because it's come out of nowhere.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Obviously, that's the other big news story of the week, is that Eric Bischoff, who was once the executive director of SmackDown, last on the job just about maybe 2 months, 3 months at the most. And word comes down early this week that he has been effectively fired from the company. He's been removed from his position as SmackDown executive director. He's been replaced by Bruce Prichard, which has its own interesting dynamics to it, if you know their past relationship and history. Let me talk to you first about whose decision did this really lay with. Was this a Fox decision that they were unhappy with Eric in his position? There's been reports out that promises that were made that they didn't feel were kept, whatever that may mean. We haven't really got a whole lot of details past that. But was this more of a Fox decision pressuring the WWE because they weren't happy with Bischoff in that position? Or was this a WWE decision who ultimately decided that, hey, maybe we made a mistake here, Bischoff isn't the guy for this spot, and so we're just going to cut our losses and move forward before this Fox and SmackDown deal gets too far down the road?
I like how you said there were some reports out and then quote my own tweet back to me. That just made me laugh. Whose decision was it? WWE for certain. Absolutely for certain. Fox were not unhappy with Eric Bischoff. I can say that with some reliability. He was well respected in that role where he was liaising with Fox. The contacts that I have there are very clear that they did not dislike Bischoff. He was doing at least an okay, at least a passable job in that regard. However, there were a lot of nuance to Eric Bischoff's role. He wasn't just there to keep Fox happy. And the decision was ultimately WWE's, and there is only one person who ranked above Eric Bischoff. So it was a Vince McMahon decision. There can be no two ways about it. Even if Fox were unhappy, they could not fire Eric Bischoff. There was only one person who could. It's also possible, of course, and I want to say this just out of respect for the man and the role that he had. I don't believe the WWE have used the word fired or let go. They have simply stated that he has been replaced. So it's possible that because of situations as they were, because of, as has been alluded to, that maybe the ratings drop affected things, but there was also a concern about personnel changes. That's what I was told by Fox. So it could be that they were unhappy with the draft, or they were unhappy with this element or that element. It could be that under pressure from both sides, Eric Bischoff decided it wasn't worth it. The decision ultimately to replace him was made by Vince McMahon. It may be that he simply didn't think Bischoff was up to the job. It may be that Bischoff himself didn't think he was up to the job. But Vince made the call. He made it quickly. And that was that for Eric Bischoff.
Do you think that it was a fair decision? And I ask that because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that Eric Bischoff in his position did not have any creative control over SmackDown. He wasn't the head of the writing team. You know, he was strictly there for his business acumen and, like you said, a liaison between the WWE and Fox, but had no input whatsoever in the creative. And then when we heard that Bruce Prichard would be the one replacing him, it was reported that Bruce would have creative control over SmackDown, that he and I believe Ed Koskey were now going to be the heads of the writing team for SmackDown. So even though he was replacing Bischoff in that executive director role, he was going to be given creative control over the brand. So if that is true, you know, Bill Parcells, you know, American football coach, said a famous quote that said, you know, if you want me to cook the dinner, you have to at least let me buy the groceries. So would it be fair to put the blame for ratings droppings or mistakes with the draft or just bad creative at the feet of Eric Bischoff if he really had no say in the creative direction of the brand, and then to also then hand over those creative reins to Bruce Prichard, who's the guy that's replacing him and effectively giving him even more responsibility than what Eric Bischoff had?
There is no denying, based on every report that's come out, the roles that Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff had didn't seem even close to related. They have the same title. That was as close as it got. It seems as though Bruce Prichard coming in will have a very similar role to Paul Heyman, if not exactly the same. They will both directly oversee creative and report to Vince McMahon. I don't know the nuance of the business and what may have happened internally, but when it comes to the job role that he had, you look at what Brian Alvarez was saying. People weren't sure what Bischoff was doing. People didn't really seem to enjoy working with Bischoff or didn't understand what he was going for. That Bischoff maybe didn't know thoroughly all the talent and their characters. If that wasn't his role, how could he have been expected to do that? If you're saying, during shows he only seems to sit in catering, if he doesn't have an active role during shows, if there's no one to liaise with, if there's no one to manage, as it were, because they're already actively doing their jobs, what else is he going to do? He's at least there to oversee it. We have been told on several occasions that the SmackDown script was rewritten at the last second by Vince McMahon, while Bischoff was not in charge of it, or at some point wasn't even there to be in charge of it. So there clearly were problems with the SmackDown process. Eric Bischoff was not brought in to fix those problems, clearly, otherwise he would have had that role. But Bruce Prichard has been. So why wasn't he trusted with creative? We know Eric Bischoff can create. We know he can write. We know he can create the product and at least put a challenge in with some big names. How much input did he even have? Did he get put into a situation whereby he went in and said, look, in the draft I want this person, this person, this person, and got none of those people? There are rumours about certain members of the roster who potentially didn't want to work with Bischoff as well. Why was he given this role, why was he not trusted with a similar role to Paul Heyman, which effectively undermines him to anyone who works with him? And then to be removed in this way and replaced with someone who is trusted, why was Bischoff brought in at all?
When you report that people said that there were promises made that weren't kept, do you have any specifics on that as far as what they may be alluding to? Is that just a cop-out as a nice way of saying why they let Bischoff go? Were there actual issues on the business end? Was it TV ratings? Do you know specifically what officials or may be alluding to when they speak of promises made that weren't kept when it comes to Bischoff?
Unfortunately, it wasn't a WWE source, so I can't really say business in that regard. However, it was a Fox source, so I can say, for example, the ratings played a part. Bischoff was known by Fox to be a very good talker, very charismatic, and he would say things which, unfortunately, by the end of it, did not carry over. I've got to believe, yes, ratings played a part, that was mentioned. Personnel, I've got to say, maybe people were promised. Fox, I should say the Fox source, not Fox in general, just the source in question, did allude to me about personnel changes. So when you connect the two, promises about personnel changes, there is definitely some things at play there. You look at Bray Wyatt doesn't seem very Fox, I've got to be honest. And when you talk about Fox wanting to bring a more sports-orientated style, Ronda Rousey wasn't on the card. Sonya Deville, who has MMA background, wasn't drafted. Yes, you have your Brock Lesnar's, you have Cain Velasquez, obviously, but you seem to lose a lot of the big stars. A lot of people were theorizing that Fox would be the A show. That is definitely not the case. Roman is undoubtedly the biggest star who is a full-time wrestler. You've obviously got Brock Lesnar, you've got Daniel Bryan. They are huge names who will go very far and really help to make it a thing. But you lost Becky Lynch, you lost Charlotte Flair, you've been promoting these people on your TV show. So Fox has been using these faces together with Seth and Roman to be the driving force behind their marketing. And only Roman was still there. You've got to believe, especially after the move on Tuesday, Alexa Bliss coming over with no return, I gotta say, I think she was promised.
Yeah, and like you said, it does seem so strange that if those are some of the underlying issues with that, Bischoff didn't have anything to do with that. Like that, like you said, that wasn't his role. Bischoff didn't have anything to do with who got drafted to SmackDown and who didn't. He didn't have a creative role, but it seems like he's kind of the one that's taken the fall and taken the bullet from it, at least in some respect.
I can only agree, really. It could be, as I mentioned earlier, he decided to step down when he realized the reality of the role. It seems more likely at this point that someone was hired over his head. Someone was literally just put in place for that role who Vince McMahon felt was a better option, who he trusted more, and Bischoff was just unfortunately in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Very interesting situation on a lot of levels. Let's move on. You made mention just a second ago about personnel changes and roster changes that maybe Fox were not so happy about, and you mentioned the Fiend Bray Wyatt, who was drafted to SmackDown, is somehow still going to fight for the Universal Championship against Seth Rollins, which is a Raw title at the Saudi Arabia show. But he is a member of the SmackDown roster as of now. But that Fox officials may not be too happy with that. And even though he is one of the WWE's probably biggest stars right now, maybe doesn't fit into the Fox framework of what they're looking to push the SmackDown program as.
I don't think Fox really understand Bray Wyatt. I think this may be one of the reasons we saw the Firefly Funhouse burn down. I think it's very telling that we saw a Fiend appearance during SmackDown during the draft, But how often do you see the Fiend playing peekaboo? Is that a thing we often see? Just popping his head over the ring, just popping his head. Bursting out of the ring was never his thing. That's not how he's ever worked. Popping his head up and just having a look around and then dipping back. It's not how he's ever worked. It's watered down. It's less extreme. I don't know. It feels a bit strange. And to my knowledge, from what I'm being told as the days go on, Fox really aren't sure what they can do with Bray Wyatt. How do you market Bray Wyatt to a sports audience? Is the Fiend going to come to a ball game? Is he going to sit during baseball? Do you see that? Do you see the Fiend turning up on one of the kiss cams? Do you see that? Do you see him joining a panel show? He was on a morning show and it was amazing, but it wasn't the Fiend, it was Bray Wyatt. And he was in character the whole time and nobody kept a straight face. Have you seen this?
Yeah,
when
he was doing weather with the weatherman. Yeah.
It was amazing. And nobody had a clue what was going on. You play along. That's all you have to do. You just play along. Let Bray lead. And you thought just let him in. Let him in. To take his own branding, just let him in. It shouldn't be difficult. And yet he's now on Fox. He's now on SmackDown. Also, he's now on USA and on Raw, apparently. I know that they're just trying to fill a Saudi Arabia card. But Seth already had a match. You didn't need the Universal title to be defended. You didn't need it. You can just draw a line under that. Forget the whole feud because it's not worked. Just accept that it's not worked. Forget the whole thing. And work with Wyatt now on SmackDown. But who's he going to feud with? How's it going to work? Are we going to end up with a WrestleMania main event of Bray Wyatt versus Tyson Fury? Because I'd rather not. Gotta be honest. I'd rather not.
No, I would be in agreement with that. And yeah, we could do a whole show, I feel like, on this topic, the Fiend and the booking that he's had in just the past 2 weeks. But yeah, why, after the Hell in a Cell debacle, when they drafted this SmackDown, I thought, okay, that's perfect opportunity to just walk away from it. Just, okay, pretend like it didn't happen. They're on separate brands. We just walk away. And I actually thought the coming up from under the ring was actually pretty cool on SmackDown. It was unexpected. I didn't expect the Fiend to show up during that match. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I thought it would be a way that maybe we would get to a Fiend Roman Reigns feud on SmackDown. That maybe they would play into, Roman is Seth's friend, and now the Fiend is on SmackDown with Roman. So there you go. And now they've booked this match again in Saudi Arabia for the Universal title with the two competitors on different brands, and they've made it a Falls Count Anywhere match, which is, I don't know how they're going to get themselves out of this one. They had a hard enough time figuring out a finish for Hell in a Cell, so I don't know. Are they going to stack a forklift on top of Bray, and let Seth pin him, kind of like the halftime heat between Mankind and Rock? Are they going to? Yeah, are they going to topple some staging over him? Like, they're going to have to do something like that, I would think. Something gimmicky like that to pull this match off. And I think it's just going to make people angry regardless of what they do. Oh,
absolutely.
So it's just like they're a glutton for punishment. Like, why book this? Why do this to yourself again?
Yeah, the fact that you're saying how are they going to get out of this instead of how are they going to deliver a finisher, it's now something that they have to get out of. They've cornered themselves. Also, that halftime heat was so good. The actual camera on the forklift just coming down and pinning the Rock, that was beautiful. But no, they've cornered themselves with Bray Wyatt. And the person who's harming the most is Bray Wyatt. Because he's fought tooth and nail. He's been so inventive, so creative. He's crafted this whole new persona. He's got everyone behind him. He's incredibly popular. And they've walked him straight into a position where nobody wins. Including the fans, including Seth Rollins, including Bray Wyatt. Nobody wins in this situation. But it's Saudi Arabia, so you've got to have a Universal title match on the card.
Just, I don't know, just doesn't make any sense to me, but hopefully they can figure out a way to get themselves out of it. But I agree with you. I don't see a way that this match ends and Bray Wyatt is any the better for it. And like I said, it is a real shame because I feel like he's done everything that he could do to make himself a main event player and to reinvent himself. And he's done that time after time again. And it just feels like the WWE never really is willing to fully pull the trigger and run with him for whatever reason. Someone else that is unhappy right now is a former member of the Wyatt family, Luke Harper. Luke was not drafted during the draft. He was part of that free agent class that was just announced yesterday. He will be on the SmackDown brand. Made his big return with the Rowan and Roman Reigns, Daniel Bryan angle. They had the tag match at Hell in a Cell. Haven't seen him since. And, you know, Harper's a guy that he's asked for his release in the past. He's voiced his discontent with not being used and not being a part of the active roster in the past with WWE. Now here he is. He makes a return, just for the big match at Hell in a Cell, but now seems like there's really nothing for him. Like I said, wasn't even involved in the draft itself. What can you tell us about his current state, his unhappiness with maybe his current position, and what can we expect from him going forward in the future?
Harper was added to the match, added to the feud between Rowan and Roman very last minute as a way to wrap it up before the draft kicked in. He was an available figure who was able to tag that allowed Roman and Daniel Bryan to team up, get the face turn they were looking for, still get Rowan the win over Roman before drawing it level again. But then, of course, they were already planning to move Rowan to Raw away from Daniel Bryan. That leaves Harper in a very simple position, exactly back where he was. It seems very likely to me he's going back into creative hiatus, hopefully not for long. Hopefully we'll see him on Friday and they'll have an actual plan for this. But to my knowledge at the moment there is no plan for Luke Harper. He was pulled in late just as a way to pop that story, make it very concise and wrap it up in a neat little bow. He is not happy. That's not changed. He has been put in a very difficult position in that they don't use him but won't let him leave. And so we're going to get moments where he tries to force their hand, which is something that has happened recently on Twitter, for example. He wants to move on. He wants to be used, and I don't think that's much to ask for. I don't think they should be holding him back if he doesn't want to be there. It's a real shame. If they don't have anything for him, I hope they decide to let him go.
Yeah, I think back when he asked for his release last year, I think the WWE responded by actually adding more time onto his contract. So they definitely didn't have any intention of letting him go then. You wouldn't think that would probably change now, but I agree with you. He's a talented guy. He's a talented big man. I would like to see him used more. Let him get in there with Daniel Bryan. Maybe extend that angle. They're both on SmackDown. I think they would put on some really good matches together. I thought they had a good showing whenever they had an exchange and were in there together during the tag match at Hell in a Cell. So I think a guy like Daniel Bryan would be a great opponent for a guy like Luke Harper.
Completely agree. I think there's still another match with Roman Reigns in there. But then when you look at some of the competition, you've got Braun Strowman now. Harper and Strowman would have a pretty good match, I think. Yeah. You've got Brock Lesnar. They've worked together before. It was okay, but brief. You've got Bray Wyatt. There's history there, and every now and then it's a good thing to throw two strange characters together. You've got a whole host of options there. Luke Harper's a guy who can work with pretty much anyone. He's got a very strong range. Give him a shot.
Yeah, Harper's definitely a guy that is probably looking for a change in his fortune, but somebody that has seen a positive turn in his fortune, and probably more specifically his bank account, is Tyson Fury. He reportedly this week, his asking price or his cost for his match with Braun Strowman at the Saudi Arabia show has apparently come in around the $15 million mark for one match in Saudi Arabia. Now, those numbers may not exactly be that high, but you got to think that obviously he's not showing up and working for free either. So it's costing the WWE a pretty penny to get him there to the Saudi Arabia show to get in the ring with Braun Strowman. You know, he joins as well Cain Velasquez, who's going to be on the card wrestling Brock Lesnar. You know, these outside athletes, you know, I know Cain Velasquez is now signed a multi-year deal with the WWE, so I guess we may consider him a wrestler, quote-unquote, now. But obviously another guy with MMA background. Tyson Fury, you got to believe this is just simply going to be a one-off. But when the WWE is pulling on these outside athletes and celebrities in, and especially bringing them into the Saudi Arabia show, you know, this type of match with Strowman you would almost see more likely for like a WrestleMania, you know, a special attraction. Like, you know, I think about the Floyd Mayweather Big Show match that we saw. Seems to fit more in with that genre, because if nothing for else, I'm not exactly sure how many people in Saudi Arabia would really be familiar with a guy like Tyson Fury, or even Cain Velasquez for that matter. I may be wrong, but I would think that their popularity is not going to be as high as it would be here in the States. Is the fact that the WWE is paying so much to get Fury there, is that a WWE call, or is that a Saudi Arabia call? We know that the Saudi government has asked and requested for certain superstars and personalities to be at these shows. Is that a call from the Saudi side of things, or is that a WWE call to bring Fury in and maybe hopefully pop a rating on the network, or to increase ticket sales at the Saudi show itself?
It is a bit of both. I think it's worth also you say that, is it a Saudi call or a WWE call? You also have to figure in Fox on that, because even though Tyson Fury has been on Raw, he came in during the SmackDown launch and definitely will have helped pop that rating and keep the rating going consistently. I have looked into the amount of money that is getting. The 15 million quote comes from the Daily Mail in the UK, which is not a paper I particularly trust, but if the information goes further back, I haven't really researched beyond that, so I believe the original source is a Daily Mail. Let's see about that one. There's always been a bit of an air of mystery around the amount of money that WWE actually get from Saudi Arabia. I remember the first show, someone saying to me, oh, they're going to get between 100 and 200 million dollars. So that's like $100 million margin of error there. That doesn't strike you as a bit of a shock that it could be either one of those massive sums or anywhere in between? We don't really have any actual information. We just have a lot of hyperbole at the moment. Tyson Fury might be a very small amount compared to how much they'll actually earn. It could be just for this match, or it could be a bit more beyond that. He could be in line for a deal rather than just the one match. So we don't know the ins and outs of the details. We do know that the Saudi Arabia shows do not do very well on the network. They really don't. I didn't watch the last one. I found it unlikely I'm going to watch this one. It is a house show. Titles very rarely change hands. I'd be very surprised if any titles change hands on this one. Really, the only titles that would be likely to change hands given current champions would be women's champions, and they can't wrestle on these shows. So it's one of those whereby it's a very difficult situation. I think WWE also chose to bring people in to pad out the card because we have people saying no. We have quite a bit of talent in the locker room now saying no. Those numbers are going up. People who are refusing to work Saudi Arabia. I was told quite recently that just by the one person within WWE that there was even someone who was already on a Team Hogan or a Team Flair who was considering refusing working Saudi Arabia. It's not just a case of Sami Zayn anymore, who was told not to come. People are saying no. People are paying attention. People are more politically active, and they are making that decision. WWE still got to put on a show. And Saudi Arabia still want to see big stars. This may just be WWE two birds, one stone.
It'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. Every Saudi Arabia show is always a hot topic whenever it comes around, and I'm sure that we'll be talking all about that as it gets closer, and I'm sure doing a full preview and review of that show as we have done with all of the WWE pay-per-views, so make sure that you're on the lookout for that. I want to thank Tom again for joining us this week. Make sure you're checking out all of his news reports and news and rumors on Twitter at Colohue. You can check me out on Twitter if you would like at Korey Gunz. You can also check out the Sportskeeda and Dropkick DiSkussions Twitter pages as well. Make sure you research those and give those a follow. Subscribe to the Sportskeeda YouTube channel so that you get notifications anytime me and Tom drop a new episode, or you can check out Gary Cassidy's interview series. He has a lot of great guests that he's had recently and also that are coming up. So make sure that you are tuned in for that and subscribe to the Sportskeeda YouTube channel to make sure you see when those go up. Appreciate everybody tuning in on Dropkick DiSkussions presented by Sportskeeda. We'll see you next time.